I'm a freak. I think at this stage of my life, I've become a freak. See the freak with the energy sword and the, and the little AI on his shoulder that, he talks to. Come one, come all. When Halo 3 came out, I pretty much thought we were done, or at least my participation in it was done. Halo 3 had a finality to it that 2 didn't have. The game had already gone 2 games longer than what I thought it was going to do. And although I do remember thinking the story is not finished, I thought my takeaway was, geez, there's so much more we could do here story-wise that is not going to get done. And then they did Halo Reach, which was my participation in that was minimal. But even then, I still thought there's all these complexities in the story arc that are not going to get told. Oh, well, there you go. So I moved on. My focus career-wise was still very much radio. In fact, in 2008, things were going pretty good in the radio department. The Drive, the station I was on in Chicago, I was doing mornings, and we were doing great. The numbers were fantastic. The ratings were good. So all of that, all was good. And I was really moving away from any more thoughts of Halo or video games, period. So it was generally a good time career-wise, but I had moved on to the next level, not having, and importantly, the whole, the things that happened beyond the game, vis-a-vis conventions, none of that was happening for me at that point. I had done 1 or 2, I think, and very low-key stuff, and so there was not all that outside thing that ended up happening, and that blossomed or exploded into what it is now. As much as I didn't have any idea that after Halo 1 there was going to be a Halo 2, after Halo 3 I had no notion that there was going to be anything beyond what I had just done. Halo 4, as I said, I thought we were done, and then they brought me back for these little cameo things in Reach, and then I was really done. The next thing that had happened was 2011, which was the 10th anniversary of Combat Evolved. And they flew me out to Seattle for a Halo Combat Evolved reunion or celebration, 10th anniversary celebration. That's where I met Jen Taylor for the first time. And Jen always tells the story that when we first met, she literally jumped into my arms, and just because what she said was, finally someone who gets it, someone who understands this strange journey that we've been on for the last 10 years. And that's when we first met. It was a reunion of a lot of the cast members. Tim Dadabo, the voice of Gildy Spark, was there. A number of other, Marty O'Donnell, who was the one who cast me in Halo in the first place. So it was a nice little get together, and then word came that they were working on Halo 4. Bungie had moved away from Microsoft. Microsoft retained the rights to Halo, developed a separate division to manage their video game interest, one of which was, of course, Halo, and that was 343 Industries. And work was beginning on a Halo 4. Although, at the time, I didn't know I was going to be a part of it. And in fact, I wasn't going to be a part of it. They had decided that they were going to recast the voice of Master Chief and Cortana, had hired new people. They had recorded their parts. Everything was done. We were out. Now, I know none of this other than the fact that I'm not working at the time. And then that changed primarily as a result of some pushback from people who were beta testing Halo 4 and said they loved the game, but they didn't recognize Master Chief and they didn't recognize Cortana. So that's how we got back involved in the game. And I remember basically auditioning. I was auditioning for Master Chief 10 years after I had been doing the role. But it all worked out great. I understood why, there was some concern about would we be up to the task of doing a little more of an emotional Master Chief, and the relationship between he and Cortana was going to be a little more involved, and, could we pull that off? And I think we did. So, that's where the journey of Halo 4 began. And that's really when things started really gearing back up again for me for Halo. And that's the convention stuff started, and, things began to change pretty radically at that point. The fans were not done with Halo, and they wanted more, and they anticipated more. It was basically a whole new company that was going to be producing the game. I think there was a lot of anticipation about that. And, to my point about the fact that there was so much of the story that had been left untold, now they were going to tell it. And, so I think that, and I think video games in general were going to another level. And to now, I think, around that time, around 2012 or whatever it was, video games as an entertainment industry was really going to to the next level, becoming multi-million-dollar franchises and big productions, feature film type productions and feature film type budgets. And, so I think just the whole industry, went through this, I don't know if you'd call it a metamorphosis, but something that just made it bigger than it was before then. So Halo 5. So 4 comes out, and had mixed reviews. The good news for me was they liked the story. The bad news, they didn't really like the gameplay. They had some problems with some of the gameplay. And, so then we go to work on Halo 5 Guardians, and they sort of, somewhat minimize Master Chief's role in the game. You could play other characters. You could be other people other than Master Chief. So what happened, that game came out and people thought the gameplay was better, but hated the story. And part of the reason was it was not Chief centered. That's where they wanted the game to be. And in retrospect, I thought that although I loved Agent Locke, who was a new character who was introduced to the game, and I loved his interaction with Master Chief and all that. And Master Chief had sort of gone rogue, and Cortana very much did. I think they really wanted to keep it in a Master Chief focus. Good for me, but and so Guardians, I think of all of the games, Halo 5 probably had the roughest time of it. But then conversely, that's when, like I said, outside of the video game stuff, the convention stuff started to become bigger and bigger, not just for Halo or for me, but for everybody. They started drawing, it wasn't just San Diego Comic-Con. It was a lot of video game conventions that were drawing 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, 70,000 people at these things. It was becoming a whole, big deal. So that was kind of exciting. So between Guardians and Halo Infinite, in terms of the Halo series, it was pretty quiet. There was a much longer time between games than there had ever been before. For a number of reasons, Halo Infinite took a much longer time. I think part of it was getting the tech. They were coming out with a new Xbox system. There was a lot of new things technically that were trying to be integrated into the game that I think slowed things down a little bit. And of course, COVID, which put a monkey wrench into everything. When COVID hit, we had just really begun recording the audio or the voice part of the game. And I think we had done maybe 1 or 2 sessions. And then literally, because the sort of ground zero in the United States for COVID was Seattle, Washington, Redmond to be specific. And we were recording about 3 blocks from where that nursing home outbreak occurred. And we remember very clearly that, like, uh-oh. And shortly after that, all the studios shut down, production shut down, and that extended things by another 2 years. So it ended up being a much longer process. They had to figure out how I could and Jen could record from our homes, rather than going into a multi-million-dollar audio facility. Now I'm going into my closet in my second bedroom, but we did it. They sent out some gear and we, jazzed the place up a little bit. So I finished recording, all of my parts, literally in my closet, and it turned out pretty well. I would defy anybody, myself included, to tell me, as you would listen to the cinematics in Halo Infinite, to tell me which one was recorded at the studio in Seattle and which one was recorded in my bedroom. I would have preferred to do the whole thing in a studio. Being able to interact with people. We all went through this with Zoom and all that stuff. And yes, you could make it happen, but nothing replaces face-to-face interaction. And it was the same, even though voiceover stuff is by and large, sort of a solitary thing anyway. You're in a little booth, but at least on the outside of that booth, there's another person, there's a director, there's an engineer, there's maybe a writer. None of that existed with, and I credit my director, Paul Crocker, who really was able to keep a connection between him and I, solid. And, consequently, I think we got what he wanted to get, out of my performance. And so it did work. But having said all that, nothing replaces, face-to-face contact. So I hope the next time we go in to record some stuff, we'll be back in the studio and be able to do that. 2015, I retired from full-time radio. I had been doing it for 44 years. Most of those years, it was a blast, and I feel fortunate that was my career. I often say I never felt like I worked a day in my life because I did what I loved. But the last few years, it was getting old. Radio, in general, had become so corporatized that all the fun that it was bled out of it, quite honestly, years ago. And I didn't feel like it was fair to the audience. I felt like I was being disingenuous to the audience, and that, coupled with the fact that I didn't have to do it. And once that became obvious, I thought, I don't want to be one of those guys that stays too long. So my wife and I made the decision that I was going to retire from radio, not really thinking that I was still going to have a vibrant voiceover career. And that has certainly been the case, maybe more so now than it ever was, which is sort of interesting how that works out. But I always thought I was a late bloomer. Everything I did, I always, did. The best part of my radio career was the last part of my radio career, which is interesting. And it's turned out that way in a lot of ways with voiceover, not just with Halo, but with other things as well. As a dear voice or actor friend of ours always tells us, never get out of line, because you just never know when your opportunity is going to come, and you want to be ready for it when it does. So I never got out of line, and here I am. When I retired from radio, first of all, I had more time on my hands, needless to say, so I could do more conventions. Part of the restraint of appearances was I had a 5-day-a-week job that I had to be at. And, as nice as my bosses were, it was like, dude, you got to be at work Monday morning at 5 a.m. So, I always tried to work the convention stuff around that, but it was difficult. A lot of the convention promoters didn't grasp Master Chief and Cortana perhaps the way they should have. And in all honesty, I don't know that I did either. I changed agents a couple of years, let's see, it's been a year and a half ago, to a company called CelebWorks. And the guy that I was talking to when we were going to make that change, Neri Lemus, he talked to me about Master Chief in a way that I'm not sure that I really understood, even though I've been doing the character, in terms of how the audience relates to him, how the fans relate to him. And I often tell him he had a better understanding of who Master Chief was in the greater world than I did. And so I owe him a lot, and CelebWorks and all the people there a lot in terms of, understanding that and getting out more into the public eye. He said to me, "You're an icon." And I mean, what he really meant was Master Chief is an icon. But he said, you're not your character is not the same as all these other video game characters or anime characters. And I'm not trying to certainly not trying to elevate myself, but even the character of Master Chief above, other great video game, characters and actors. But he did have an understanding that I didn't fully appreciate. And once I sort of gave him the reins on that, the other thing was, post-COVID, the whole convention circuit had shut down, obviously, for 2 years when COVID hit. Once it opened up, it was like an explosion. It was like a dam bursting. And all of a sudden, there's conventions all over the world, and everybody's calling, and everybody wants you to make an appearance and all that. So it was sort of the perfect storm of having somebody who knew that, who knew the importance of the character, and then having a market that was just hungry for it. And the third thing is I was available. I no longer had to be at work at Monday morning at 5 o'clock. So those three things combined have made the last year and a half or so, in terms of the appearance part of it, just an unbelievable ride, a great ride, but pretty amazing. So my one revelation after, like I said, we've done a lot of conventions in the last year and a half. And I had a revelation one time. I was in the hotel lobby as we're all convening, and by all, I mean all the other, celebrities and actors and their people and all that. We all gather in the lobby, and then we jump on a bus or whatever and go over to the convention hall. And it occurred to me, I'm in the circus. This is the circus, because you go into a town, you set up, you do the show, the elephants come in, the clowns do their thing, the acrobats walk on the high wire, you break it all down, and you go to the next town and you do it all over again. Because oftentimes you're seeing the same people, at the same events. I mean, there's core of us that there's some variance on that, but for the most part. And I was like, wow, I'm in the circus. I've run away and joined the circus. And the reason for that is because it's sort of a traveling road show. And, the events that we do these things in oftentimes are, I couldn't tell you one from the other. They're big convention halls, and they set up these things, and they have the vendor area, and they have the autograph area, and they have the panel rooms. And, for all intents and purposes, they're all pretty much the same. And you do your show, and then you move on. And so it occurred to me in sort of a bemused way that I have, at this stage of my life, joined the circus. I'm the what am I? I'm the elephant boy. I'm the alligator man.
You're a freak.
I'm a freak. I think at this stage of my life, I've become a freak, see the freak with the energy sword and the, you know, and the little AI on his shoulder that, he talks to, come one, come all, Yeah, I really did not have an understanding. And after a while, I thought, Steve, you need to get an understanding in order for you to be able to do this, with a genuine purpose. Because one thing I refuse to do, and it's just not in my nature to do it. And I've seen other people do it, and it doesn't look good, doesn't feel good, is to do things artificially. If I can't be sincere about it, then I just don't want to do it. So that's what I'm trying to struggle with, people who would tell me, how much the game means to me, and, to the point of, breaking down and being in tears and, telling me very personal stories of their life and how Halo or Master Chief sort of pulled them out of some, in some cases, suicidal, thinking. And I was impressed with it, and I was like, but I didn't get it, And I spent a lot of time, trying to relate to in my own life, because that's the only way, you can get a handle on these things. It's like, well, what is it about me? So, in my, I didn't grow up with video games. They didn't exist. Pong came out when I was, 28 years old or something. So that was the first video game that I was aware of. The connection I had to make was, what thing happened to me in my life that changed my life? And I don't know if everybody goes through this, but I certainly went through it. I had a singular event that happened in my life that altered the course of my life going forward forever. When I was 13 years old and the Beatles came on Ed Sullivan, and it changed my life I didn't know it at the time. I was 13. I didn't know anything. But when I look back on it, it was every facet of my life, every single thing you could imagine. The way I looked, the way I thought, what was important to me, how I related to girls, my career, every single thing that was important at all changed on that night in February when the Beatles came on Ed Sullivan. And then everything that happened after that. And so that was my moment. That was my Halo moment. And so when people tell me a story that, like, you were the reason why my dad and I had a relationship. We didn't have a relationship until we both sat down and started playing Halo together. Or my big brother and I, or my a girl and her mother. One of the advantages of being part of a game that's generational is that you hear these stories, because the game's been around for 22 years old. People come up to me and say, I started playing this game when I was 4. And I go, 4? Where was your mom and dad? Because it wasn't really for a 4-year-old. Nonetheless, but how they had these life-changing moments that, and then in some cases it did, direct them on a career path, or they found the person that they fell in love with and got married. I could open up a whole side business of officiating marriages. If I would get a minister's license, that could be a whole nother career for me. No, but, to preempt any request, that's not happening. But, the one that comes to mind, it's usually the most recent ones that come to mind. And this one happened, a few conventions ago. A guy, came up, I think with his dad, or somebody relative of some sort. And he was a paraplegic and, was in a wheelchair, motorized wheelchair. And came up and when the time came for us to have an exchange, he lost it. You know, he was overcome. And, it was very emotional for me. You know, here's a guy who, you know, has a whole hell of a lot to deal with in his life. Always did, always will. You know, Master Chief can come and go and this and that and the other thing. That dude still got this to deal with. And it was very moving to me. And all I remember about it was because he just literally could not get a word out. And not that he wasn't capable, he just was overcome. And so we just sat there together. And I don't think he ever did. I don't think he ever did come around. But it was just, you know, extremement moving and emotional for me. And I'll never forget it. And it's not the only time that's happened, but it sort of was emblematic of those kinds of exchanges. And sometimes, you know, when that happens, man, you just gotta just be there. Jen Taylor's real good about that. We had another guy come up, similar thing happened, and Jen was with me, and you know, the guy broke down and all that. And I put my arm around him and I'm like, okay, it's okay, man. You know, we'll get this together. And I'm trying to engage him, you know, and Jen's just like, leave him be. You know, Cortana saves the day. And she just like, leave him be. And that's what we did. And he had his moment and it went well. But it is those kinds of things. And you know, there are a lot of other ones that happen that are not as dramatic as that. But no less meaningful of, you know, how many times I've had people who, you know, have told me that, you know, that's why they got in the service. You know, that's why they, you know, or a guy who's doing, you know, 3 tours in Iraq. And the one thing that kept him and his, you know, buddies sane was coming back and playing Halo. And, I mean, those are like, you know, wow. It's just, it's a privilege to be able to do that in some small way for somebody. And it's like, I mean, these guys are the real deal. You know, I'm playing one on TV, right? I mean, I was not in the service. I never had any experience close to what these guys had. And to know that you could bring them some sort of momentary, you know, release was, you know, an honor to me. Which was a little sidebar. And this happened not too long ago. I met my first Master Chief. So in all the conventions I'd ever done, and I meet a lot of servicemen, I had never met one who was actually a real Master Chief. So the guy came up and I was like, hey, you're my first Master Chief. You know, we talked a little bit about it. And he says, you know, I love the game and everything. He says, but I got one bone to pick. And he said, when you're in the service and you come across a Master Chief, if you ever call him Chief, it will be the last thing you ever say standing, because that's not, it would be a sign of disrespect, first of all. And you would find out about that in no uncertain terms. And this, because we say that in the game all the time. And I think they do in the TV show too. Hey, Chief, you know, yada, yada, yada. That would never happen in real life. Okay, you take a little bit of artistic license, but I told him, and I remember Jen was there too, and she was going to go back and tell the writers of the TV show, is like, it's always Master Chief and nothing else. So for you kids out there, you know, never do that. Often when I talk to people who have no clue about any of this, usually my golfing buddies or whatever, and who they think this is just the weirdest thing they've ever heard of in their life. People come dressed up as Thor and anime characters, and they walk around and all this, and you know, there's this big nerd factor there. And I think, quite honestly, we all wear the nerd badge pretty proudly. But whether or not that's the case, I'll tell you the one things I never see, and I've been doing these things for, you know, over 10 years now. You know what I never see? I never see people drunk and obnoxious. I never see people obviously, zoned out on drugs or whatever. And I'm not saying these things don't go on. All I'm telling you is I don't see them. And I'll tell you what, if I go to a Bears game, I guarantee you I'll see it. Okay. That's a given, right? So don't tell me about, how weird these people are when, you go to these things and they're all respectful of each other. And, like you say, they have a bond that they're sharing. And they cooperate with you, as opposed to going to a football game where, if you get out of there without getting in a fight, you're pretty lucky. So that's my take on that. When people talk to me about how weird it is like, yeah, I'll show you weird. What makes it fun for me and what makes it easy for me is to watch the camaraderie between the people who are attending it, the attendees, if you will, and the respect they have for each other and the fun they have together. And, many times these are people who don't know each other at all, but they come together with sort of a common purpose and a common, like, and they enjoy each other. And so as a person who is, basically hired to be there, to be able to watch that happen, and not just from the autograph part of it, but just how they interact with cosplay, how they interact with the vendors. It's really fun to see, and it puts a smile on my face. It really does. When I first started doing conventions, the people who would come up to my table were always sweaty dudes. It was pretty much exclusively sweaty dudes. Now it's all kinds of people. It's women, it's men, it's boys, girls, parents, grandparents, black, white, it just the gamut. And, boy, I'll tell you that, that is another thing that makes it, sort of fun and rewarding to do, to be able to see, wow, I'm part of this deal. And that's a deal I want to be part of, I'm the closest they can get to the character. I'm the only flesh and blood thing that they can actually shake a hand and talk to and take a picture with. And I understand that, but always in the back of my mind, I'm thinking Master Chief is the star here. And, I lend him a voice. That is one small part of who that character is. To me, all of the credit goes to the people who conceived him in the first place, and the writers of all the games, going from Combat Evolved up to Infinite, and the respect that they have for the characters is what has kept that game vibrant and alive, in my opinion, all these years. So, I just get to speak the words. I don't make up the words. Somebody gives me the words and I say them. So I'm happy to be a part of it, but there are so many other moving parts that make the game what it is and make the characters within the game, what they are and why people, gravitate towards them. My agent said, how long are we going to do this? And I said, as long as it's still fun. When it stops being, it was the same way I felt with radio. When it stopped being fun, I stopped doing it. And if this ever stops being fun, I can't imagine doing the actual game. People always ask me, what's your favorite part of all this? Well, my favorite part is actually doing the work. When you get the call to say, we're going for another game and here's the dates, and you go in and you meet the director and you meet the writers and you look at the script and here's where we're going, and then try to, sort of gear yourself up for that. That's my favorite part of it, is actually doing the work, actually being in that room, reading those lines and doing it well. That's my absolute favorite part of the whole deal. All this other stuff is great, but that's the real payoff, But one of the interesting things from our aspect of voice acting video games, one thing that has not happened, that usually does happen, is Hollywood comes in, and now instead of Steve Downes doing Master Chief, it's Brad Pitt. or in fact, Marty O'Donnell tells this story about they had no intention of doing a Halo 2. In fact, one of the big wigs at Bungie had a thing about not doing sequels. We don't do sequels. It's one and done. Well, with the enormous success of the first Halo game, Microsoft said, I want you to rethink that. So obviously they did a Halo 2. And when they were thinking, okay, well, now we need to get, some big name voice actors to do Cortana and Master Chief. I believe that Tom Cruise was actually mentioned as a possibility to do Master Chief. And, fortunately, for me, other minds prevailed, and they decided if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And so they kept it the way it was. And my point of that story is that, with a few exceptions, big name Hollywood actors have not crept into this business in the way that they've crept into animation, for example. When The Lion King comes out, or one of the big animated movies comes out, it's chock full of Hollywood actors, some of which are good at voice acting, some are not. But they got the name recognition. And for whatever reason, that has not crept into the video game part of it. And Nolan thought that it's because the fans are so involved and committed to these roles. They don't want any deviation. They don't want a big name replacing the guy or woman who had been doing it for the last 5 years, or, whatever it had been. So, fortunately for people like me, Tom Cruise gets Top Gun Maverick, I get Halo. I'm good with that. So, but it's sort of an interesting phenomenon, because usually, and it could happen, as we move down the line, that could happen, and whatever. But it is interesting, and it's a direct result of what the fans want. And I think more so than movies and TV shows, the fans, I think, play a bigger role in how games are done than they do in movies or television. So the TV show, Halo, the TV show on Paramount, I knew pretty early on that I was not going to be part of that. There are certain physical attributes that I do not possess. Mainly, I'm about a foot too short and about 20 pounds too heavy, and all of that. So I think I had a fantasy about being part of it, but it wasn't realistic. And I think Pablo Schreiber, who does Master Chief, does a tremendous job at it. So I think they do a really good job. I think, the landscape of failed TV show adaptations of video games is legendary. And one of the reasons is because they try to replicate the game in a different medium. Video games and movies are two different mediums. The two are not the same. And for people who expected Halo to be an exact copy minus the shooting part of it in the movie, we're not being realistic. So I don't necessarily agree with every plot twist they've decided, but I'm a fan. I like certain things I like about it, certain things I don't like about it. But overall, I enjoy the show, and I came at it from a fan of science fiction, which I am. And so here's a new science fiction show that I want to give a shot to, and try to eliminate all the other baggage that I may bring to it as a viewer. And so I watched it honestly, and I was like, yeah, I like it. And, I like it enough to watch the next season, which they're shooting right now. And I think the fact, for me, what holds the whole thing together is that Jen Taylor, who is Cortana, is in it. And the only, I would say demand like I had of saying it, which I didn't. But the only thing I was adamant about was if you don't use Jen Taylor as Cortana, you're nuts, and it's a stupid thing to do. And fortunately, they didn't. That was not always the case in the beginning, but they came to their senses and decided that Jen was and she is. So that to me, and it should be for most people who are fans of the game and watch the show, that she is the conduit between the two and does a fabulous job. So I'm really excited about what they're going to do in the new season. I think Master Chief is a pretty good guy. I mean, if you delve into the story, and it's funny because the TV show actually highlights this some ways, and more so than the games do. The Spartans can be a nasty bunch sometimes, and we're very devoted to keeping order in the universe, if you will. And it's funny because I think the TV show brings this out more so than the games do. But they did not always treat people in the way that they should be treated. But in Master Chief's case, I think he always wants to do the right thing. He's loyal to his friends. He has a clear sense, I think, of right and wrong. So those are not bad qualities to have. So for younger people, and this is will be the feedback I get sometimes from people who talk about going through a rough time in their life, and how Master Chief was sort of the stable force in their life, is that he is a stable force, that he has a sense of duty, of right and wrong, and even in the case when his superiors would ask want him to do something he didn't feel good about, he had a clear sense of not going to go there. So as superheroes go, he's not a bad dude, we all growing up have been attracted to superheroes, and the basis of that is the hero myth. And I think Master Chief very much fits into that mythology. The eternal quest, the righting wrongs, all of that. And maybe that's part of the success of Halo, is that he's such a classic character in that regard. Man of few words, the strong silent type, protecting the weak. He checks all of those boxes. And so, I think for if you're looking for a hero, he's not a bad guy to emulate. I think we could all use a Master Chief right now. We could use that, but Master Chief doesn't really exist. There's really not, that person doesn't exist and will never exist. And what it tells you is we need to be our own Master Chiefs. I always say that the guys who created Halo, and Master Chief in particular, were genius in a number of aspects, one of which was they never gave him a face. You never see him. And what you do see when you look into Master Chief, you literally see yourself reflected in his visor. And I don't think that was by accident, because at the end of the day, we all have to be our own Master Chiefs, and we all have to finish our own fight, and we all have to take care of each other. A Master Chief he's not gonna come, flying over the horizon on a big white horse or a pelican. That's never gonna happen. But if you could take anything away from, inspiration for who that character is that you need to draw upon yourself to be that character. Be your own Master Chief in your world and be that to the people around you. You know, I often say when we do cameos, one of my favorite, you know, go-to lines is stay strong, stay healthy, be focused, watch each other's backs, take care of the people around you. That's what he would do, and that's what you should do. You know, people ask me, what's my favorite Halo game? And my answer is always, was always the same up until recently. I was always Halo 4. And it was because Jen and I got to work together in the same room, because the story was deeper, because I had more lines, you know. But now I would say it's Halo 4 and it's also Halo Infinite. And Halo Infinite because I feel like it's a more well-rounded game than anything since Reach and 3. Just every part of it is better, but also the things that you brought up about Fernando, you know, the pilot, and also the weapon, who is the new Cortana. The Chief's relation, you're right. They are relationships that he's never had before. You know, Fernando is maybe an example of the world. You know, like, what? You know, it's all going to hell, you know. And the Chief is like, dude, you know. And at one point early on, you know, the pilot says, you only have one bullet. And the Chief is like, that's all I need. and I love that. But he's, you know, I think in Infinite, he becomes much more of a fatherly figure than he ever was, both to the pilot and to the weapon. You know, the weapon is now a young Cortana, very naive, and the Chief is like, it's not the relationship of equals that it was between him and Cortana. He's got to bring her along, and then he's got this other guy who's like freaking out over here, you know, who he needs to, you know, say it's going to be all right. And so, you know, in Infinite, he takes on more of a calming, you know, influence and a fatherly influence than perhaps he did in any of the other games. So, and it was fun to play that role. It was fun to take on that part of Master Chief. I enjoyed that part of it, you know, maybe because I am a father and you know, and a grandfather, and, you know, so, you know, any actor will tell you when you're going into a role, you try to pick something that you can relate to in your own life. So those aspects were easy for me to access because I am that. I just get to be that now with an energy sword and a big pelican to fly around in. But it was, you know, so that's what I would tap into, when I was doing that part, and it was really fun. The future of Halo, it has not been written. I think there is a future there. I know, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that, the way 343 wants to move forward with Halo Infinite, is not, you know, there's not going to be a Halo 7 and a Halo 8, you know, that's not really where they're going. They're building chapters on Infinite. You know, one has already come out, a couple have already come out, and there will be more that feeds off the Infinite timeline, moving forward. And I think that's probably a good way to do it. You know, it really depends on the interests of the fans. If I still think, even here we are, you know, 20 some years later, I still think there's more of a story to be told. I mean, you know, you got to remember that I look at Halo strictly from the story part of it. I'm not a gamer. I suck at Halo. I'm the worst Halo player on the planet. And I've proven it on a number of occasions. But story-wise, I think there's a rich story there, and I think that's the genius of the creators and the developers and the writers. There's still, I mean, where we left off with Halo Infinite and the pilot and the weapon and the banished and all that. There's all these loose ends that we can still tie up. So I'm hoping. I have no idea where it's going to go. I often say I'm on a need to know basis with the future of Halo, and right now I don't need to know. So I have no spoilers that I'm hiding, but I do believe that we have more ground to cover, and I can't wait to dive back in and start doing that. But I would be remiss if I didn't thank you, the fans, for everything you've given me. You guys, you pay a lot of money for an Xbox, you buy the game, you come to the shows, and it's a debt that I could never possibly repay, other than to be able to take this moment to say thank you for all of that. And may we together finish this fight. Thanks, everybody.